when I think of planning a video, I want to plan it in the way that the viewer sees it. Step one is that viewer is scrolling, right? They see the thumbnail. Thumbnail catches their attention, stops their scroll. They look at the title. How does that give them a little bit more? How does it, increase their curiosity? Okay, we've planned the title. They've clicked. Let's plan the hook. Let's plan the intro. Let's plan the content. So if you plan it in that sequence, then you could say, okay, I have the thumbnail, I have the title. I'm now planning the hook and the intro. I need to make sure that hook and intro is dialed so that it connects so closely. So by the time they click, everything that you've promised them, it's just building and building and building. And maybe even the hook and intro, maybe it does give them a little more, but maybe it continues to build. If you can make the thumbnail, title, hook, and intro like this perfect package, then by the time they get to the information, they're just like drooling, ready for that information.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Creator Files podcast. Today's episode is a little different because we've decided to do a debate episode where we are going to argue about if you should make your thumbnail before or after you film your video. We both pretty much generally agree on this all the time, that it's better to make your thumbnail before you film your video. But for the sake of this debate episode, I'm going to try to pose the best argument possible for doing it after you film your video. And Nathan is taking the opposite stance. Let's go.
Get ready to lose. That's all I can say.
Fair. Probably. Why do you think it's better to make your thumbnail prior to filming?
I think, to me, the number one and most obvious reason is that the title and thumbnail is the marketing of your video. That's the only thing people will see before they ever click into the content. And so that really, once you have your thumbnail and your title ready to go, I think that really dictates what goes into the content, especially the hook, especially in the intro. Like we've talked about before on this podcast, where it's like a funnel, right? You get the thumbnail to the title, to the hook, to the intro, to the main content. And so I think that if you don't create the thumbnail, and well, I'll say thumbnail and title combo here just for the sake, since they kind of go together. If you don't create that first, you basically like chop off the top part of your funnel and then you just start with the hook and the intro. I guess you could do that, but I don't think that's the right way, because then if you just do your hook and intro, then you're like stuck into what you would have to do for your thumbnail and title, because your hook and intro, once it's so specific, like what you're promising and delivering on in the video, your thumbnail and title can only match that. So you're so limited on options. Whereas if you plan your thumbnail and title first, the world's your oyster. You could do whatever you wanted and say, okay, how can I take this marketing and then deliver on that process? So I feel like it just like creatively really leaves you wide open to create whatever you want, which I think is just better marketing. If you have like a pool of 5 options versus a pool of 10,000 options, well, yeah, I'd rather choose the pool of 10,000 options, because then I can just be more creative. I could maybe push the edge of the clickbait a little bit just so that I could, pull all those marketing levers possible.
Because you're locked in.
Yeah.
So you don't want to, because you could argue that if there's something specific you said in the filming that you weren't expecting to say, right, well, now your thumbnail doesn't match. So you could argue that you make the thumbnail and then you're locked into what you can film.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I guess to me, whatever's in the content is just, I don't want to say less important, but it's secondary. To me, it's always secondary. Why do people watch your video? It's because of the marketing of the video. It's like the only reason they care about your content is because that photo on the YouTube screen that they saw and then the title that went along with it. If it wasn't for that, they would not have cared to click on your content, even if your content's good. And so, you said something in your video you weren't expecting to say, and like maybe your original thumbnail and title doesn't match anymore. I think that's okay. I don't think that you have to use your thumbnail and title that you create firsthand, like before you ever plan the video. But I think that it's a good exercise to start with the thumbnail and title, because then you have the marketing in mind. And so even if you don't end up using that version, or you need to tweak it a little bit so it does end up matching exactly what you say, you still gave yourself the opportunity in the beginning to have way more options for the marketing than you would have if you had created the thumbnail and title after.
Because it's easier to edit
Right.
a thumbnail or make an entirely new thumbnail than an entirely new video.
Exactly.
Fair. What about people that will procrastinate on publishing because you don't have the perfect thumbnail? And so you make a video and you're editing it, and then you're like, well, I can't figure out what the thumbnail should be. Wait, I'm arguing the opposite point. No, I'm failing. That's an entire bullet point I wrote down for myself that argues your point.
You're welcome to say it if
really
you want. The 1 point extra for me that I didn't even have to think of.
Yeah, there you go. I wrote you won't procrastinate on publishing because you don't have the perfect thumbnail because you already have the thumbnail.
I agree.
Oops.
I definitely agree with that. I think that that's something, honestly, like when I create videos, I don't always think of my thumbnail first. I'll be completely honest.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do that every single time. But then I get into a situation where I am procrastinating because I don't have a thumbnail and title. In fact, I'm literally dealing with that right now. Before we started recording, I told you that I have a video ready to publish today. And me and my business partner were literally arguing about the thumbnail and title, which if we had just done it before, the video could have already published already. So like, I really think that that is a huge deal.
Okay, well, what if you had tried to do it before? You might not have published today because maybe you would have argued about the title and thumbnail for so long that you wouldn't have even been filmed by today, and then you would be more behind than you even are today.
Well, it's possible. Probably not likely though, because I feel like if that was the case, which it has been in the past, where we'll be talking about a thumbnail and a title for so long, where we'll just be talking like over text. We don't live in the same city, so we'll be like texting, and I'll just start the video. Like I'll just start recording the video while we're still talking, and then I'll just like strongly suggest we move toward what I'm already filming, just so that we can just move on. I know that's not the best way to do it, but I don't know. I feel like if the title and thumbnail needs enough massaging that it takes a long time, you might as well give it that time, and then we could just put a different video in for whatever week we needed to publish. So I don't know. I would say that that's probably not the best reason to do it after, but maybe you could make that argument.
Yeah. So you genuinely don't think you would miss a publishing day because the thumbnail took longer because you take the filming so seriously?
I don't think so. And then also just the type of videos we're like creating. Like I've been working on this video for 3 months. And so like we've had a lot of time to talk and think about the thumbnail. So we have had some discussion about thumbnail planning, but like as far as like nailing down the final concept, where we are today is very different than the original concept that we talked about. And I say original, like we've only been talking thumbnail and title for like a week and a half, but the video's been in progress for like 3 months. So yeah.
Yeah. So I actually know a bit about this video, which we probably won't get into unless you want to share, but you said that this video, I'm assuming you're talking about the same one, has changed a lot from what you originally expected. So if you had made the thumbnail for it already, then you would have to make a completely different thumbnail probably, or would the thumbnail have it worked either way?
Well, I don't know. For the purposes of marketing, actually, the thumbnail that we're, I think, really close to settling on right now nearly would work if the video hadn't taken that turn that it did. Because the original concept is like a challenge concept. And so the marketing of the thumbnail currently is still surrounding like the outcome of that challenge. It's just that the turn of the video made the outcome totally different. And so rather than focusing, let's say, on a positive outcome of the challenge, like maybe now we're focusing on the negative outcome of the challenge. And so that's kind of the marketing behind it. So I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, I would still have rather like talked about the thumbnail early on so that all of this like thought that we're putting into it now, I feel like there's just like a foundation of thought that needs to go into a thumbnail and title. And if you do that earlier, it allows you to just focus on the video, focus on the edit. Because I know a lot of times when I'm done with the video edit, I'm just like, let's spend 10 minutes on the thumbnail and we'll just get it out, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's the right approach. I would rather put the extra time and effort and then build that foundation for that thumbnail and title, even if we end up tweaking it or totally changing it. But then we have a really good idea of, at that point, maybe, okay, this was thumbnail A idea. It's not going to work out because the video changed. But we've talked so much about it that I think we could really easily pivot to thumbnail B.
Right. And as you're explaining that, I'm thinking with the story video, the fact that the story changed does not need to change the thumbnail.
Not really.
Maybe there's a more interesting thumbnail you could get out of that story change, but more likely it could stay the same because the audience doesn't know that there's a twist in the plot line when they're clicking the video. And you probably almost don't want to be biased by that when you're making the thumbnail. I'm getting off track again, arguing your side. Okay, these are going to get stupider and stupider because because really it's probably better to make your thumbnails beforehand. Don't tell Nathan I said that. Okay, so I think one argument is if you wait until you film, you can see what the best part of your video was, like the part that you were most passionate about and you delivered the best, and you can chop up the whole video, see what you cut. Like maybe you end up cutting something that would have been kind of necessary to the thumbnail.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't cut it, but you realize that different parts are better emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
And then you really want the thumbnail to reflect that. Now, you could argue that, okay, well, it's easier to change the thumbnail than the whole video. Sure, it's absolutely easier to make a new thumbnail. But once you've made a thumbnail and made the video, then are you really going to have the motivation to change the thumbnail anyways?
Maybe not. Let me counter with this. Okay, so let's say we do a video. The thumbnail's not planned beforehand. We do a video and something really awesome happens. Like we think, okay, that would be a really great thumbnail.
Yeah.
And let's say for that video that it really worked out that way. Like, okay, we got this great thumbnail. But if we talk about like reliability of a process, I don't want to rely on the fact that I want to hope that something amazing will happen during a video.
Okay.
And so I'd rather just have that consistency where I can say, you know what, maybe I'll end up tweaking this or pivoting the thumbnail, but I'm starting with like the best possible scenario. Something like that we talk about in our meetings is like, what's the most like almost outrageous idea that we could come up with for a thumbnail that would just like guarantee a click. I would rather start there reliably every single video than hoping during the video that like we magically have that idea pop up in our heads and then we say it perfectly in the video and then it perfectly matches the marketing and perfectly matches the intro and the hook. It's just like it could happen, but it's almost like the stars aligning type stuff, which just doesn't happen all the time. Okay.
So could you argue that it's actually pretty much guaranteed that things aren't going to go as planned? Like when have we ever planned a video that went exactly as planned? And so you plan a thumbnail thinking that the video is going to go one way. It goes a different way. And then you have to hope you have the energy to change it because you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to rely on that.
Right.
But it's almost guaranteed that things aren't going to go as planned perfectly. So there's always going to be some curveball in the research or in the delivery or in the storyline or even just in adjusting what you want to say that you didn't expect.
I mean, I think you're right. I think things when, like we all know, when we film, like it just doesn't go how we typically hope it does, even if it's like 80% of the way there. It will always be different. However, I think I still stand by the fact that even if things change a little bit in the content, the marketing can still be the same. I think a lot of times the promise that we make in the thumbnail is typically like, it should be broad appeal. It's something that a lot of people would want to click on. Like that's marketing, right? Appeal to the largest audience possible, get them to click, grab their curiosity and just make it so they have to click. And so usually it's broad enough that even if things change a little bit, I just really feel like they're not going to feel ripped off. And if they do feel ripped off, typically that means maybe the combo wasn't right. I think sometimes we can say, okay, the thumbnail could stay the same, but we're just going to tweak the title because usually the title's typically a little more descriptive, not always, or maybe it's just the text in the thumbnail. But a lot of times you can still promise a similar element, and if you've done 90% of the thumbnail work already, then I think that you won't have to tweak it too much.
That's fair. Thumbnails are changing recently because we have this feature where you scroll over the video and then the video starts playing, and most of the experts are recommending that you have a thumbnail that looks similar enough to that first screen that it almost feels seamless. Like you don't really notice a jarring difference between the thumbnail and the first scene. How do you do that if you don't even know what the first scene looks like before? I mean, you could have an idea of what you plan the first scene to be, but the framing and stuff, it won't be exact until, again, it might be different than you expect.
I think it can be the same. And here's how. I think that I think, again, in the ideal world, which we do not live in, I do not live in by any stretch of the imagination, it's that when I think of planning a video, I want to plan it in the way that the viewer sees it. Step one is that viewer is scrolling, right? They see the thumbnail. Thumbnail catches their attention, stops their scroll. They look at the title. So if we're planning in this same sequence, it's like, okay, we planned the thumbnail. Okay, that's good. It's eye-catching. It's scroll stopping. Okay, what's the title? How does that give them a little bit more? How does it, increase their curiosity? Okay, we've planned the title. They've clicked. Let's plan the hook. Let's plan the intro. Let's plan the content. So if you plan it in that sequence, then you could say, okay, I have the thumbnail, I have the title. I'm now planning the hook and the intro. I need to make sure that that hook and intro is dialed so that it connects so closely. So by the time they click, all that thing, everything that you've promised them is just like, it's just building and building and building. And maybe even the hook and intro, maybe it does give them a little more, but maybe it continues to build. And so I think ideally, if you've planned that all out really well, then the content, I think a lot of times, especially on information, it's a little bit different for other types of videos, but especially for information, if you can make the thumbnail, title, hook, and intro like this perfect package, then by the time they get to the information, they're just like drooling ready for that information.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't matter if it's like a perfect match.
Okay, you win. Just an honorable mention. What if you get so bored of editing and you want to take a break and work on your thumbnail, but you already made it?
Make another one.
Make another
And
one.
then when you get the A/B tester from YouTube, then you can throw those in there. Okay, here's the thing. I think yes. I think that doing it beforehand is probably the best
Absolutely.
option. However, I would say more often than not, especially on my personal channel, I don't do this very well. I think in concept, I would do a lot better.
So what stops you? That's such an interesting question. I mean,
Yeah.
been there too, but let's
Yeah.
talk about why is that if it's so important and we know it's so much better
Right.
and we have to do it at some point anyways. There's lots of things in life that you can procrastinate on and then never actually do them, even though
Right.
you should have. Thumbnails, like we know we have to do it before the
Right.
video publishes. So why?
Oh man, I don't know. It's just laziness. I don't know if there's any better answer than that, because I know that it's better. And maybe it's just that when I think about planning out a thumbnail, there's like the informal planning versus the formal planning.
Yeah.
So like I think most of us on YouTube do talk, at least to ourselves, about thumbnails before we do the video. When I come up with a video idea, my mind immediately goes into, what is the story going to look like?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that's the failure, is like, if we plan the story out, and again, maybe that's the other thing. It's hard with different content. So this video that it's supposed to publish today, like I said, I've been working on it for 3 months, and it's not something where I can reliably say like, I know what's going to happen at the beginning of this video, and I know what's going to happen at the end. Like, I have to let it play out a little bit. And so maybe there's like that little fear in me, like what you brought up, is that things could just totally change. And then maybe the work that I put in would be made irrelevant, and I don't want to waste time. I am a procrastinator anyway. So like maybe it's just all of that kind of doubt that kind of just builds up. It's like, I'll just focus on the video and then we'll do the thumbnail later.
Yeah.
That's probably part of it.
I almost think of thumbnails as like the sales part of
Yeah.
YouTube. You know, sales isn't fun. You want to make your product and your
Right.
creative masterpiece, and selling it, which is what the thumbnail and title feels like, is kind of not that fun.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people that it's fun for, but I think for most of us, that's kind of the case. It's like, how do I convince people to want this thing that I feel like is very valuable, but they don't know what it is yet? And that's a lot of pressure. Just to clarify one more time, I definitely agree that it's better to make your thumbnail beforehand. It's hard to do. I wish I could remember which YouTuber said this, but he said that he'll do consults. He's huge. I don't remember who. He'll do consults or just be talking to people. I don't know if they're official consults about their thumbnail and video ideas. And they'll have this video idea and he'll say, what's the thumbnail? And they'll say, well, I can't think of a good thumbnail idea. And he's like, then you don't have a good video idea,
Right.
which is crazy. That sounds so extreme that you could have like an amazing video idea and that somebody would say, you do not have a video idea, period, because you can't think of a good thumbnail, or until you think of a good thumbnail. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah. And I think I get what this person was saying. I'm trying to remember. Was that at Vid Summit? That they said that?
Maybe.
I feel like I heard that at Vid Summit.
Maybe. I'm not
Anyway,
sure.
but I get the sentiment there. I think that it's a little bit extreme, like you said. To me, what that says is you haven't finished thinking through it yet. And I like the sentiment that you need to think of a thumbnail, because I think they're right. It's just that without the marketing, the video doesn't matter. You know, nobody else, there's no way for you to help a viewer see what the video is. There's no other way. We don't have that ability. It's just like, it is thumbnail, it is title. That is the only thing that's going to get someone to click on your video. And so without that, it's like, why would you want to put in hundreds of hours of work? You know, maybe less if your videos are easy, but like, why would you put in so much work into something if you haven't even thought about the marketing? It's like putting out a product to market before even doing any market research or anything like that. You should be doing the market research. I go back to like the formal thumbnail planning versus informal. I think a lot of creators, they start with the informal thumbnail process, like just thinking about the video idea, getting excited, but they don't sit down and say, okay, what's going to make someone click on this? And I think if you would do that, it could probably take 5 minutes, like that process of outlining like 5 different reasons someone would click on this video. That's the start of like what would make a good thumbnail or title.
Yeah, I like what you said. What else do we have? Like, that's all you have. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the "Don't judge a book by its cover" quote.
Yeah.
Which, unless I'm missing something, it's kind of stupid, because how else are you supposed to judge a book? Are you supposed to walk into a library with your eyes closed and pick something out? Like, that's all you have, unless somebody recommended the book. But at some point, somebody had to pick up the book because of the cover and the title. So YouTube videos are the same way. It's all you have. It's all the viewer has to decide, unless they're subscribed and love your channel, but they have to get there somehow. So yeah, good points. Thumbnails are important. Maybe if we look at them as more of a creative process, like the video, we can get more excited about them and less, I don't know. Yeah. Just not procrastinate.
Yeah. I think that's a hard thing to do, because like you said, it feels like the sales part, which some people probably really like.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people who do YouTube, it's for the creative aspect. Mm-hmm. And so creatively, if that doesn't feel creative, if it just feels like this task that needs to be done, whereas the video is like, I get to express, my interest or emotion or my thoughts, like that's the part that you will naturally gravitate to. It's the thing like that you just want to do. And the thumbnail probably doesn't always fall into that. One thing that I am really interested to see, so with the YouTube's A/B tester that's coming out, I would be so curious to do the thumbnail planning before the video, get thumbnail and title, and then record the video, and then test that against a thumbnail that you did after.
That is a good idea.
You'd just be really curious to see, like, if we did that reliably for like a year on all of our videos, what would that look like? Would we see, like, is there as big of a difference as we really think, or are we just overthinking it? I always kind of like to think like, okay, we're pretty confident that it's better before, but what if it's not? What if there was something about it being after? I don't know.
Man, I've never thought about that. That is such a good thing to test, which is crazy, because we've been talking about testing things for weeks. We have the beta version. We talked about it on last week's episode number 24 of Creator Files, because we're playing around with it, and I never thought to use one that we made before and after. Yeah, it'd be really cool too, like if maybe we could have one of the editors or somebody who wasn't at all involved in planning or making the previous thumbnail.
Right.
So that they're completely unbiased by the ideas that were in that previous one. Yeah. Really, really interesting. We got to do that.
Maybe, it could even be like in our review process, if we had a third party watch the final cut of the video and say, okay, maybe they never heard of the concept of our video or anything like that. They watch the cut and then they say, all right, what could be the thumbnail or titles? Like you said, they're totally unbiased. I would be really curious to see not only what they come up with, but if it performed good enough.
Right.
I don't know.
We're going to test it.
Very interested.
For sure. Nathan clearly won this debate. If you want to hear more about the A/B tester, watch episode 24 of Creator Files. And I think we're going to do more debates in the future, because this was fun. Have a great weekend, everybody.